to the Willow Kids podcast, a space where curiosity is nurtured, creativity is encouraged, and learning is treated as a lifelong adventure. At Willow Kids, we believe children thrive when education goes beyond memorization, when it invites wonder, builds confidence, and honors each child's unique rhythm of growth. In this podcast, we explore how kids learn best, hear from inspiring educators and parents, and share ideas that support thoughtful, joyful learning in academics, the arts, and life. Whether you're a parent, educator, or lifelong learner, we're glad you're here. Let's grow strong minds and kind hearts together. I'm Mily. I'm an educational therapist with a background in early childhood interventions, and I'm here today with our guest speaker, Katelynn Brown.
Hello, my name's Katelynn. I have a background in child and adolescent development and have worked exclusively with kids for the last 6 years.
So before we get into our topic today, I would love to share an announcement. We're excited to share that Willow Kids is officially launching its tutoring pilot program in Calabasas, California. This pilot is designed for families who want to start more thoughtful and personalized educational programs that traditional tutoring does not support. An approach that supports academic growth while nurturing curiosity, confidence, and genuine love of learning. If you're a parent in or around Calabasas and interested in learning more, we invite you to visit www.willow.kids to explore the program. See what we're building and sign up for the updates. Spots for the pilot are limited, and we're excited to grow this community together from the ground up. Visit www.willow.kids, and thank you for being part of the Willow Kids journey. I wanted to go through a little bit of insight before we go through our questions. So we want to understand why kids learn better with extra support, such as tutoring. Kids don't struggle in school because they aren't smart or trying hard enough. This research shows that kids learn better when they get extra help that is focused just on them. When kids get one-on-one or small group tutoring early on, learning becomes easier and they feel more confident as school gets harder. So with that being in mind, I'd love to ask our guest speaker our first question, which is, so when a child starts to fall behind in reading or math, why does it become harder and harder for them to catch up as time goes on?
Yeah, that's a really important question, especially early on. So in elementary is where you see a lot of tutoring and intervention come in. If kids aren't receiving intervention when they're already falling behind in elementary school, the schools tend to leave the kids behind because classrooms are so full. Most classrooms nowadays have at least 25 kids, and if one of 25 kids is struggling with math or literacy, the teacher doesn't have time to stop whatever they're doing to help that kid. So a lot of times you have a lot of kids and there's just so much that a teacher can do, and schools already are having so many budget cuts and so much of their funding is being allocated elsewhere that they can no longer take the time to help that kid. And so now they fell behind this week because they were out sick or they didn't understand a topic. And now that they didn't understand that, next week it's just going to be more and more and more because there's no one-on-one anymore.
I can see that this has been an absolute issue in a lot of our educational systems and schools today. Teachers also feel like they cannot connect with their students one-on-one on that personal level. And students, sadly, because there's so many of them in a classroom, they do tend to fall behind, especially the ones that are already struggling. So the article, The Impressive Effects of Tutoring on Pre-K-12 Learning, a Systematic Review and Meta-Analysis of the Experimental Evidence, is a working paper from the National Bureau of Economic Research. It was first published in July of 2020. And it was created by several researchers. What I find really interesting about this paper is that it's actually the first systematic review and meta-analysis that looks across all rigorous experimental evidence on tutoring within the elementary school range. So I hope everyone can see my screen here. I just want to read a little bit from the article. So when students in a classroom span a wide range of skill levels, teachers struggle to address the needs all at once. Students who miss out on foundational knowledge and skills tend to fall farther and farther behind and are also less able to follow along in class. So this really just piggybacks on what we were just discussing.
Yeah, it absolutely does kind of piggyback off of it. You can see that as kids are working through trying to do trying to catch up, a lot of them tend to continue to fall behind. And as they continue to fall behind, behavioral issues start coming into play. And then because of behavioral issues, they fall even more behind.
Yes, and all those students that are already behind, they are going to need that extra support. They are going to need that extra one-on-one relationship connection building with the teacher as well in order to get them further ahead. And without that, there are going to be it could lead into serious and detrimental effects because students that are not getting the help that they need are going to be moved along and passed without even fully understanding and acknowledging what they're actually learning.
Yeah, exactly.
So with that being said, why do you think small learning gaps in early grades sometimes turn into much bigger struggles later?
I definitely think that those small gaps in knowledge that the kids are experiencing early on in life become such a detriment later on is because they don't have a strong foundation anymore. And while the gaps might seem small at first, it's like you're building a pyramid. If you're missing the entire bottom, nothing's going to stay standing. And so
Mm,
it's really important to understand that these kids are learning these skills at a certain time for a reason. And that reason is being that it is their foundation. If they don't have basic reading comprehension, then how are they supposed to take English in high school? How are they supposed to be able to read something and analyze it and kind of really decipher what it means? And then that just transpires into their whole life. And so it's really important to understand that those small gaps really impact those kids because they are missing so much.
I couldn't agree more. I think there are definitely a lot of missing holes there, um, to try to get a whole full classroom of kids to learn the same subject and be on the same curriculum. And it is not, unfortunately, a one size fits all kind of a program that we see in a lot of elementary classrooms.
Right.
So that's why I feel like tutoring is so beneficial, especially early on. So, yeah.
Tutoring early on really kinda sets kids up, and if you think about it, like, we're expecting 5, 6, 7-year-olds when they enter kindergarten, 1st grade to be able to follow along with all of the distractions that come with being in a classroom with other kids. And for the most part, kids aren't getting that social aspect anymore. They're not socializing before going into the school system, so this is the first time they're learning the social aspect and the academic. So they're having to compare both things at the same time and learn both types of skills at the same time. And when you are trying to learn both of them, something's going to give and something's going to be taken away, and the kids aren't going to have that chance.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. So I think it's a lot to navigate, especially at an early age, especially for that age range we were looking at as well, the kindergarten age range. I think that's a lot of pressure to be
Yeah,
put back.
it is. And then so that's why we see that early intervention, aka with tutoring, is so impactful. Schools have so many systems in place between after school care, reading readiness, outside tutoring, setting up tutor resources for parents to kind of initiate themselves. And it's so important that those are happening because the kids are dealing with 100 different new things at school that one-on-one is what they need to focus and really see what they're supposed to be learning.
I feel like as the educators, we have a responsibility to ensure that our students are getting what they need, whether it's socially, behaviorally, or academically. But I also find that that can be incredibly challenging for educators in the classroom with a full class. So I think it's trying to critically and analytically think about how is it that we're going to be able to bridge this gap and sort of find a balance there where we can still be there for those struggling learners that really do need that one-on-one attention.
Absolutely, and teachers already have their hands full. They're dealing with
Mm,
25 different kids, that's 25 just different personalities, and on top of 25 kids, you're dealing with 25 parents, plus
mm.
the administration on top of it, and so while it is the teacher's job to teach, it is also the parents and other support systems of the child to get that extra one-on-one support.
Why does, for example, helping a child in kindergarten look so different from trying to help them in 3rd or 4th grade?
Yeah, it is so different because of the developmental stage that a kid is at. A kid that is 5 and 6, their brain is so much more malleable, meaning that it's more flexible and is ready to learn and is doesn't have any of those set ways set in place quite yet. And so whatever you're teaching them, they're just absorbing and they're ready to absorb. They want to absorb, they want to learn, they think it's super fun still. Versus if you look at a third or fourth grader, they've been in school for 4 or 5 years now. And so they already have patterns and habits set in stone. And it's like with anything in our lives, if you have a habit that you've already set into stone, it is so hard to break, which is why early intervention in a kindergarten or first grade is much more effective, lasts better, and the kids actually seem to enjoy it more versus a third and fourth grader are having a lot harder time deciphering what you mean and understanding what you mean and also feeling like it's important what you're talking about. I've have so many years of tutoring experience and after the age of 7 or 8, a kid is then like, I don't need to learn, I'm done learning, or they already have felt the pressure of how hard school is and how hard academics is that they've given up essentially. And it takes a very strong willed kid to be like, no, I do want to get better. I do want to be smarter and accept that help. And so that's why you see that kinder and first is so, so impactful in that tutoring because they are now able to be like, oh, I want to learn. Oh, this is fun. Oh, this is a game. And you can make tutoring a game with them. And it is something they look forward to versus the older kids, like I said, are set in their ways and their habits. It's not a game anymore. And now it's work and they don't want to work.
At that age, I feel like because they're in kindergarten and they're coming into formal academics for the first time, it's new, it's exciting. That love of learning is best nurtured as early on as possible. And then, yeah, when they start to go into second and third, it starts to diminish a little bit and, they start feeling, confident in their own set ways. So it's a lot harder once they get up into the higher academic grades. But in kindergarten, I feel like they're a lot more attentive to want to please and listen and be more responsive, and they're a lot more malleable. So that's very interesting that we're bringing this up because I wanted to show another part from the study that actually goes into this a little bit further, and it also piggybacks on what we're discussing. So let me go ahead and share that. So one of the studies that was done was based on a reading program, and it was called the MRC. And so the MRC's impact on kindergarten reading was among the largest of any estimates in our study. While effects were small in grade 3 and non-significant in grade 2, these patterns may indicate that grade level outweighs subtleties in tutoring, pedagogy, and accounting for effect sizes. So that implies that if we are going to be helping our students get these interventions and tutoring, the best time to be doing this is really around that grade level, that age level, kindergarten, 4 to 5. I would say is that age range, and so that's where the most impact could be done. That's where the most crucial parts of learning can actually happen while they're still motivated.
Yeah, and that study also, later on when they're discussing the results of the study, because it's a 49 meta-analysis, so they've taken all 49 studies and compared all of the results and whatnot, they've showed that that age range, that they have about a 50% chance of being effective. And versus if you go to second, third, it drops down to 30%. And then if you go to middle school, it drops down to 20%. And
Wow.
yeah, so while tutoring can still be effective at all ages, it has the biggest impact the younger a kid is because the kid is more likely to absorb and follow that new way of thinking.
Wow. So I'm curious, since we're talking about students within that age range and primarily students in kindergarten benefiting so widely from additional services such as tutoring, what specific reading skills are children learning in kindergarten that tutoring can actually strengthen so effectively?
So many things. Kindergarten is the basis of everything. The kids are learning what words are, learning how to sound words out. They're not necessarily reading right away, but some kids are depending on what they're learning and how effectively they are learning. So you see that a lot of kids are sounding things out or they're starting to make connections between what this looks like versus what it sounds like. And so if the kids are made already making connections between words and their sounds and can start sounding things out and then start putting together sentences, you can see that so much of it is now that foundation again. Like if I can't sound out a word, how am I supposed to tell you what this word is? I have no idea. And if I have no idea, I'm not learning anything. And so that's why we see it as such a huge focus in those kindergarten classrooms.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And without learning and mastering those foundational skills, that goes back to what we were discussing earlier about, these holes and these gaps that they're going to need to be filled. Otherwise, our learners are going to continue struggling.
Yeah, I completely agree.
So, what does effective early reading tutoring actually focus on during those first school years?
It focuses on a kid's ability to figure it out for themselves, obviously with the support, hence the tutoring. But the kids are now working on how do I sound this out? What does this letter sound like? How does this letter and this letter mesh together? It even focuses on attention because so many kids are now struggling with these literacy skills that now they're having to emphasize attention to the literacy skills. And so as the kids are learning, a tutor or an educator, whomever may be supporting the kiddo, is now focusing on what does this word sound like? Okay, how does this word sound all together? What are these sounds? And it's just really going over the basic English principles. And in the meta analysis, there's not a whole bunch of research about like Spanish learning or other languages. It is really focused on English, but it shows that even if you have an English to Spanish combo support, it's showing that if you are focusing on words and what they mean and how to utilize them, and then how to start forming sentences correctly with them, that these kids are able to comprehend and express themselves so much better.
Absolutely. I think that's why it's so pivotal that we allow them the opportunities to get early intervention, to get these supports, to get these academic, any sort of support or tutoring in before they get up to higher grade levels, especially if they're struggling or they're not mastering them.
Yes, absolutely.
So, with that being said, what reading challenges tend to look different by second and third grade compared to kindergarten?
Now, when you're looking at second and third grade and comparing it to kindergarten, there's a lot of similarities, but there is a lot of differences. You can start to see intellectual disabilities start to come out, whether it be dyslexia and attention deficit. So those are a big component and is really important. Learning styles start to come into play. Learn in a classroom, you kind of only learn one way, and it's usually auditory or visual, and you don't have that combination. And so now the kids that are kinesthetic learners or hands-on, I should say, are now don't know how to learn because it's not being catered to them because in a classroom, there's only so much you can do. You can't cater to every kid as much as you would like to. And so, as you see those intellectual disabilities, you also see the kids who now don't know how to spell. They don't know how to sound out to spell, and they can't form those sentences. And so, while it was a learning thing in kindergarten, by second and third grade, those are expectations. You should be able to look at the board and be like, that says cat, that says hat, that says sat. And you should be able to start learning that those words or they sound the same and that they have all these different things. And now kids are learning what phonetics are learning all these different things because they don't have that foundation for second and third now. They are no longer able to comprehend and keep up with the class. And there we go again. Now they're falling more and more behind.
Absolutely. And I feel like since I also have a background in the classroom and teaching students, this was always such a frustration, not only for myself, but the other teachers, especially because we're on timelines and deadlines to teach all this material. But what about the ones that aren't understanding it? What are we, it was very challenging, I would say. And I feel like a lot of educators, from what I've heard, and a lot of educators that I've spoken to, they do wish that they could offer more of this one on one personalized support and attention and tutoring, but there's just not very many opportunities to be able to do that. And I couldn't agree more with you with, then having groups of students that are so far behind in the higher grade levels. So with that being said, I feel like that's one of the reasons why I became an educational therapist was because I felt like I wasn't doing enough for my students. I felt like I wasn't getting anywhere with teaching the entire class the same standards, the same curriculum. And I wanted to be able to help the students that were struggling, that were neurodivergent, that really, really needed the extra support and help. And thankfully, I'm able to do that now in my work. And I also feel like, unfortunately, this does remain a big frustration for a lot of educators. And many are also wanting to do the same, think of other ways that they can teach, but reach more students.
Yeah, and on the other side of the coin, as a child developmentalist, you see a lot of us advocating now for the extra support outside of the classroom and asking parents to get those kids tutoring or to make sure you're reading with them every night or have the kids read to you so you can see their comprehension. And sometimes that's also another challenge because there's only so much time in a day. You send your kid to school from 8 to 2, and most parents aren't available or able to be with their kids due to their working. So now they're getting home at 5, they get dinner ready. And so, with so many things being added onto people's plates, kids are getting left behind more and more. And so, having that extra support, whether it be a tutor, an interventionist, an after school program, a reading readiness, even an older sibling who's willing to read with the kiddo, is so impactful because these kids need that extra time.
Absolutely. Yeah, their whole day is gone. Completely booked. Absolutely booked from 8 to 8 PM at nights, I've seen sometimes with a few of my students, and I'm like, how do you get any of that work to really fully understand the material that you're learning at school? Cognitively, I feel like it's a lot for a young student to also process in their own minds because they're going to school all day. They start their days super early. They got a ton of like extracurricular activities, soccer, art, swimming, sports, and then they come home, they're tired, they're gonna have dinner, and then start homework. Boy, that is a lot, I feel like, to be taking on, like I said, cognitively for a young child's brain.
That and that's why you
Yeah.
see a lot of people using play-based intervention.
Mm,
They're playing, so you are playing with building blocks, and the building blocks have words, and, "Oh my gosh, I made the word sat. What word can you make?" And if you can make it fun, then you can help those kids learn despite how packed their schedules are.
absolutely. With that being in mind, where do kids miss out on the kind of attention they do need in regular classrooms?
Gosh, they miss out in the most. I feel like that's a very multi-level question, is because they're missing out on so much, truthfully, because there's only so much attention one teacher can give 25, 30 kids. And so a lot of the stuff that they're missing is during the actual teaching because kids get a lot of attention when there's behavioral issues, they get more attention when they're outside because they have friends, but during the actual lessons, teachers are so pressured to finish the lesson, get it done. It needs to be done by this day. So that sometimes teachers are just speeding through lessons. And if a kid does not have a speedy brain, they're left behind. And so they're missing that extra attention. So if the kid in the back didn't fully understand what you said, they're missing it out. And so you see a lot of that focus is lost during teaching because the teacher is so stuck on their lesson and so stuck on this needs to be taught. This is what's next in the curriculum. And because we are so curriculum driven, you don't see the needs of the kids being met first. They're being met second or third.
Absolutely. And I'm just so empathetic to the child that is constantly getting brushed off
Yes.
by, help that they need. And I also feel very empathetic towards the teachers who have to manage such full classrooms and they can't give the attention that every single student deserves.
Yeah. And while it's not the educator's fault whatsoever, It's the system completely, which is all why there's also another emphasis on why getting that tutoring and why kids learn better at an early age from that tutoring support.
Absolutely. And what I was finding interesting about the meta analysis was that it was also mentioning that the strongest impacts of tutoring would come from the actual teachers and educators and not so much from parents. So I thought that was interesting because you would think, well, the parents have the most connection with their kiddos as well. But judging by it, I find this in my work too. The parents, they're frustrated at the end of the day. And unfortunately, they don't have the time or really the energy to sit down with their kiddo and make them learn and practice these skills, let alone play. So we do need very skilled educators that can make learning fun and can also play with them. Doesn't seem like it is so difficult to learn these things when they're having fun, especially, the topics that they need to be mastering. And also, it's just they're having fun without even realizing it.
Yeah.
But yeah, so who has the time and the energy for that as a parent?
Yeah, and it's also important to note that, like, yes, parents are exhausted and there's so much going on their plates. But if you think about it, kids, once they enter elementary and school going on, they spend the most time with their teachers. They don't spend the most time with their parents anymore. That was their formative 1 through 4, 1 through 5 years, where all of their interaction and learning came from parents. Now that they're being sent to school, and they spend most of the day, most of the week, most of the month, most of the year with a teacher.
Right. I feel like as educators, sometimes we're like their secondary parents.
Yes.
And sometimes when I have an opportunity to tutor a student with really overwhelmed parents, they're just happy that I come over and that we do something. And I'm presenting, what we're about to do, what we focus on. I have like a very structured lesson plan sometimes or intervention plan. And I'm saying this is everything that we're doing. And I'm very excited about it and everything that we will do. And they're like, just thank you for coming over, and I'm so relieved, and as long as you do something or anything, and so that to me just kinda tells you that early intervention programs and tutoring by educators is so beneficial for the students as well, because I do think that they need that structure.
Yes, I completely agree.
Yeah. So, with that being said, how does working with the trained tutor give kids the kind of focused support that regular classrooms can often provide? So, I know we've touched a little bit on this, but I'd love to delve into it a little bit further because I do want to see what sort of supports we can provide that's outside of the classroom for these struggling learners or just learners in general.
Yeah, there's a few things that we can do, and the most common one is one-on-one support. You have one-on-one, so now the tutor is giving 100% attention to your kiddo. They're catching those errors, they're catching the behaviors of your kids, trying to just plow through the homework. I have a kiddo, for example, who he is an only kiddo, and so he does receive a little bit more attention than those that are multi-family households, multiple kids, but because he is so smart, but he's lacking a lot of the skills that he needs, mom is completely overwhelmed and unsure of what he needs anymore. And so now that, you have a tutor coming in, the tutor's now able to see, okay, this is where the kid's making mistakes. Okay, now I can go back and fix this foundation. Okay, now we can start coming back up and try to catch up to the lesson. Whereas if you're in a group setting as big as a classroom, you don't have that. You can't see it as well. And you think now they're acting out or they're not trying so hard. And it's really a fast acting brain that's just trying to plow through homework because they don't want to do it anymore. Or they have other high motivations that they want to get. And then on the other side, there's also group settings. So you can have a group of 3 or 5 kids. So then the kid doesn't feel so focused on because sometimes kids don't want that one on attention. They aren't used to it. They don't like it. They don't thrive in it. And so for those kids, having a small group like 3 to 5, they're able to focus on the work they need to do without feeling like eyes are on them 24/7. So I'm able to go from kid A to kid B to kid C. And while kid A is working on this, I can help kid B with whatever they need to do. And then I can glance at kid A and be like, oh, we're having problems with this. Or instead of calling them out, be like, oh, I think I would like to reteach this. And then that way the kid doesn't feel like they're the issue or they're the problem. And they're like, "Oh, it's not just me like that's struggling." And they don't have to face that predicament that's going on inside of their brain. Like, I'm dumb, I'm stupid, I can't learn this, which a lot of kids are doing when they start to fall behind. They feel like they're the issue. And really, it's just the way they're being taught. And so, focusing one on one or in really small groups, kids are able to start building that confidence again and start building their knowledge back up and fixing their foundations.
And I also love that you brought up the effectiveness of working with children in small groups because I feel like the impact is also really great when we're not focusing on so many more other students in a, like for example, in a typical classroom, but narrowing it down to just a few learners at a time, giving them that extra intervention and the support as well as the peer support that you mentioned too. This is very crucial and very beneficial for their academic learning, their social and emotional health, behavioral, all of that.
Yeah. And you see
Yeah.
kids that have that peer support that actually tend to do better when it comes to tutoring
Mhm.
because they have a friend to bounce ideas off of or someone to help them work through problems who are closer in age, they're more like-minded, and they don't feel so intimidated by. Because at the end of the day, tutor is still an adult figure, and they can be intimidating, and it can be harder to make mistakes in front of them.
Absolutely. And that affects their self esteem, which I feel like I've noticed that in a lot of my students.
Mhm.
When they get behind on a subject and the teacher's coming around or they have a question that they don't want to ask because they're shy or embarrassed, it's intimidating for them. It's so scary for them. And so when we put them in these smaller groups, it really connects them to a safe space for being able to get that support, that one-on-one attention as well, because the teacher can go to, like what you said, student A, student B, student C, and just kind of split the time for each one of them, while still being effective. But yeah, I've noticed a lot of self-esteem, a lot of low self-esteem with learners. I would have to say a lot within the past few years. It's come up more recently, I feel like, than ever.
Yeah, and the study also mentions how, like, tutoring, programs tend to obtain more positive externalities for students who don't receive that tutoring, meaning that a tutored student is more likely to have better academic outcomes, social outcomes. They just have so much more that they're benefiting from than those who aren't receiving that.
Absolutely. And I feel like it's up to us, it's our responsibility to be able to nurture their learning. And I want to go back to a point that you made earlier because it just kind of popped up in my head. When those students fall behind and they get up to the higher grades and maybe they have now a learning disability or cognitive disability or any sort of other intellectual activity or dyslexia,
Mhm.
it is extremely difficult depending where they're at. It could be really challenging to catch them up. So this is one of the areas that I do specialize in, and it's literacy support for dyslexic students. And so what we're talking about is really reteaching them all the foundational skills again. And it takes a lot more than just being in a classroom with the teacher and them being offered them, only being able to minimally support them. They need intervention. They need it like ASAP, like immediately, because they are getting into third, fourth, fifth grade now and they can't read. But they also need someone that's supportive and willing to grow with them and also help them with their, I would say, a lot of the social and emotional aspects that come with it, the anxieties, the self-esteem of, "Oh my gosh, I'm in 4th grade and I still can't read," and also being able to understand how their brains work because of the dyslexia. It's completely different than, you know, than the general population of students, which is okay. But it just means that we are going to need to meet them where they're at.
Yes, exactly, and that's why you see that, like, educators, teachers, or professional tutors, they are explicitly trained in education. They're specifically trained to look for those deficits and how to address them, and it's why you see that they are so much more impactful than a parent would be, because a parent might do paired reading, but they don't know how to help a kid who has dyslexia, or they don't know how to help the kid who has fallen behind, and the parent's like, "Well, I don't know why you fell behind," because they don't have that same training, and so it's very important to remember that while they are falling behind, the teacher and those, like, teacher tutors or paraprofessional tutors are the best equipped to help them.
Absolutely. I feel like as educators, we're the bridge in all of the students that are involved, the parents. I have such compassion for these parents that also want to get their kiddos help, but
Mm.
they're so far behind. It's like, where do you start now? So that's something that comes up a lot in my fields. Um, Having the intervention start much later, having the tutoring start much later. And so, with that being said, it also puts a lot of pressure, tremendous amount of pressure for the child as well. But you also need to make sure that how you're teaching them and how you're tutoring them is also developmentally appropriate
Yes.
and you're not pushing them so hard to where it's going to have detrimental effects on them and consequences. You still want to continue nurturing their love for learning, although, yeah, they might be really far behind. It's a long journey, especially if students have not mastered these foundational skills and if they have an extra intellectual disability or even if they're just if they've been struggling for the first, couple or few years, it's a long journey to get them caught up. So that's something that I always hope my parents can understand that I work with that, it's not a one size fits all approach in the classrooms and we need to go back and what we really need to be doing is backtracking and meeting, like I said, meeting the student where they are at their pace and their level, making sure that our curriculum and our just are developmentally appropriate.
Yeah, absolutely. It's important to get intervention early, and even if you don't get intervention early, if you can at least get intervention daily or every other day, it's way more effective than once a week, once every other week. You actually see, and the study confirms that you can see about a 35 to 45% increase in intervention effectiveness when it is a daily thing. And it doesn't have to be 3 or 4 hours, it could be 30 to 45 minutes because you're actively trying to support that kiddo and you're actively trying to do something every single day to help them. And it's way more effective than if you were to do it 2 or 3 weeks at a time. And then that's how you can help start to close that gap. And that kid is not feeling so forced and it's not so long, so it's not so exhausting. So just even small bursts daily is so impactful.
I love that you mentioned that and helping to also, look at our program and break it up so they're also not feeling overwhelmed or just really I love making my learning fun for the students because it just it encourages them. There's so many great things about making learning fun. I mean, we could go into like a whole nother box, but it's absolutely, I would say, one of the best things about being a one-on-one tutor is that you get to customize your programming for the student. So, like for example, one of my students hates spelling. Like, you could not get him to sit down and take a spelling quiz or even look at his words, but he loves baseball. He won't do anything with spelling. He'll come up with any excuse to avoid it, or, he'll see the spelling words and he'll start, having those little moments of anxiety and frustration, but he loves baseball. So what I did was I just customized what I was doing for the spelling and I put some baseball themes in there. And now every single week he looks forward to doing a baseball Scrabble and he absolutely loves it. The other thing that I do is that I do it with them. I'm playing the game with them. And it's
Yes.
actually something that I learned from my students, instead of watching, because I had I had one of my kiddos ask me, "You're not gonna play? You're not gonna play with me? But it's really fun." And so next time I printed out a second word Scrabble, a spelling Scrabble, and, you're basically trying to unscrabble the words. I can't tell you how much fun it was to do with the kiddo, with the student, because now it's a thing, we look forward to. He's having a great time and he's learning spelling. So that's what I love about tutoring and being able to cater and customize the
Yeah, and
needs
when you
of your
look at it
student.
developmentally, like, developmentalists literally tell you that play-based intervention is the most effective. Because if it's not fun, why am I gonna do it? And I always tell my parents this, but if you wouldn't do it, why do you expect your kid to do it? So make it fun, make it something interactive, make it motivating, because if it's not motivating, you're not learning.
Absolutely. And just to piggyback on that, I wanted to also mention, you know, giving students, helping them develop positive attitudes towards their learning. Oftentimes I feel like parents are so frustrated with how to help their kiddos. And when they finally get to doing the homework, they struggle with how to make it fun, or how can I teach my child when I'm already frustrated and my kiddo's already frustrated. And so when a young child hears that, from a parent, or just kind of like that frustration, or maybe even that, um, if they say something negative about the subject, that could also really influence the child.
Yeah, it's
When I
very
was
discouraging.
Yeah. When I was learning about how much students have, for example, when it comes to math, a lot of anxieties when it comes to doing math, studying math, anything like that. And I personally, like growing up, I was not a math kiddo myself. I struggled with it a lot. Everywhere I turned to, it felt like everyone was just struggling with math, or hated math, or didn't like it. Felt like it did contribute, you know, to a mentality that wasn't so positive as well. So I feel like a lot of students are also experiencing that as well. Some negative attitudes towards certain subjects
Yeah, group
dependent on the environment around them. So I think that's important to be mindful of as well.
Absolutely. Group thought is super impactful because if kids are constantly being told something, that thing that they're being told then turns into fact. And so if they are constantly being told, math is hard, math sucks, math is hard, I can't do it, don't do math is whatever it may be, the kid is now internalizing that and now it's become a fact for them. And there's also kids on the other side of the coin. I was a kid, and I still do. I love math. But when a new subject came up, I was like, "Oh my gosh, this is gonna be so hard," because everyone told me it was going to be so hard. So it doesn't matter if you like something or don't like something. It's really impactful the words that you hear around you, which is why that you have that one-on-one support. If it can be as positive and as playful and as motivating as possible, the kid is gonna learn so much more.
Absolutely. I feel like that also builds their confidence up too. When you're maybe taking a break from doing all the formalized math, and you're deciding to make it into, for example, something I've done, like the floor is lava game.
Mhm.
Students love this and they think it's really fun, and they're, cutting the dots more quickly. They want to get to like the next stone. They don't want to fall off the couch or off the table, so they got to try and think quick. And by the time you know it, at the end of the game, they've done about 2 dozen math problems on their own. So, I love seeing their reactions after the games that we play, because I feel like they just get such a happiness, like a high
Yeah.
from it. And it's just so much fun to be able to continue nurturing that and that confidence. Whereas if we're only doing formalized education, especially with our younger students and those worksheets, that's, you know, I would say we need to continue bringing in more varied supports, a little bit more variety into our learning subjects for our students. So that way they could also have fun, like I mentioned before, and they're learning without even realizing it.
Mhm.
And by the end of, the session, instead of having them forcing them, to sit down and get through a full math worksheet, like, why not have them play a game where they can get through so many more problems, and you're playing with them, and you're just having so much fun as well.
Exactly. And that's why that one-on-one or that small
Yeah,
group is so impactful because you have
building
to
their
do it.
confidence. Yeah. With that being said, how can getting help early how can getting help early change not just a child's grades, but their confidence about feelings in school?
Yeah, getting help early is allowing the kid to not struggle for so long, not to constantly beat themselves up for not being smart enough or not being able to understand. And so when you get that help early, kids are realizing like this subject was just hard for me. It wasn't it becomes the subject was the problem instead of they were the problem. And so the earlier you get intervention, the earlier you can nip that in the butt and the earlier you can be like, hey, like this is not a you problem. This is a subject problem. Like we're working on the subject. The subject might be tough, but you can do it. Versus if you were to do it later down the road, the kid has already internalized that thought of I'm the problem. I don't know how to do it. I can't do this. And so focusing on it earlier and letting them know like, hey, like it's just tough subject for you, not a big deal. They're able to be like, oh yeah, you're right, not a big deal. Like I'm still good at this and this and this, and like I'm getting better at this. And so as they're learning earlier and getting that intervention earlier, they're able to keep the self-esteem that they had and then build upon it.
Yes, absolutely. And I think as tutors and as educators, not only are we providing that academic support, we're also nurturing their love for learning, building their confidence, and also keeping in mind their social and emotional aspects of their learning, because that's a very pivotal and a very crucial part of their growth for success.
Yeah, I completely agree.
Well, with that being said, before we close today, I just wanted to thank you so much for being here.
Of course, thank you for having me.
It was a pleasure speaking with you. And I'm going to go ahead and put out our final announcement. Thank you for spending time with us on the Willow Kids podcast. If today's conversation sparked a new idea, gave you reassurance, or simply made you pause and reflect, we'd love for you to carry that into the week and into the lives of the children you support. You can learn more about Willow Kids' upcoming programs and our growing community by visiting us online. And if you enjoyed this episode, please consider subscribing or sharing it with someone who cares deeply about education and childhood growth. Until next time, keep nurturing curiosity, keep asking thoughtful questions, and remember, strong roots grow lifelong learners.